I love reading poetry, probably more than I actually like writing poetry. And for that reason, for the last couple years, I've been taking submissions on my Twitch stream of people's poems so I can read them and talk about them and analyze them live. But honestly, that hasn't been enough for my insatiable poetic appetite. And so here we are on YouTube, so I can get more poems from people and read more and share more of my thoughts on poetry with the world. So this is episode one, I guess, of what is hopefully a series of me reading my viewers' poetry. And if you want to submit for the next episode, there's a link in the description to a Google form, and you can fill that out, and then you'll be, in consideration. Now, when I say read poetry or I say analyze poetry, you might be wondering what I actually mean by that. And I won't get into it too much because I think if you're interested, you can just stick around and watch and you'll kind of see what it looks like. But I would describe it as a very detailed reading, a really deep dive into understanding every part of the poem, breaking it down. Not so much critique or criticism as much as it is analysis. And I think that can still be very helpful and very educational, both for writers, but also particularly for us as readers. I don't think people are taught very well in school and in society generally to read things closely and to really pay attention to details and emotion and feeling in that way. So that's what we're going to be doing. Reading 3 poems, I think, maybe 4, I have no idea, super closely, talking about them, diving into them head first. And, well, I guess we should dive in. The first poem that I am going to be reading is titled, "Oh, to be a cat, because imagine this," submitted by Messier. So now, hopefully, there will be a poem on the screen, which I will put on in the editing, where I can scribble all over the poem and write on it as I talk. And here it is. Oh, to be a cat, because imagine this, by Messier47, or Lord of the Book Club on our Discord server. And they asked a few questions about this poem. They're wondering how they can improve their visual impact and the narrative strength of this poem. And as we will see, this sort of longer poem is a narrative poem. And that means, it tells a story as it goes on. But let's read it. Here is "Oh, to be a cat, because imagine this." It's high summer, soaring temperatures. You live in a house with an air conditioner. Playtime is over, your nap fulfilled, and your people have come home from a hunt, a kill, bags upon bags sorted and stored, a new bag of kibble, a taste you adore. But what's this? Something hot, something new, smells smelly and sunny, and what's that? You knew your people have brought something for them and for you. They give you a sniff, but there are no words for the sublime and sunshine in your native tongue, and your people take it, break it. They offer you a piece of high summer and honeybees, the sweetest of flowers and coolest breeze. You taste its soft flesh, and it's better on the tongue, ambrosia, nectar, manna, the food of the gods. You eat your portion and cry out for more. Your people love you, cut another piece, decadent, your new favorite, a taste you adore. But what's this? Something hot, something new, smells, no smells, and not so sunny. And what's that? You knew that something was wrong. Your people are alarmed, have brought you to the vet. For them and for you, they give you a check, a poke, you gag, but there are no words for the not sublime and not sunshine in your native tongue, and your people take you back home where the smells remain of high summer and honeybees. The sweetest of flowers and coolest breeze, you've tasted its soft flesh, deliciousness on your tongue, ambrosia, nectar, manna, the food of the gods. They offer you no portion. You cry out for more. Your people love you, and you don't understand why they don't give you a taste of heaven again, your new favorite, the taste you adore. But your people love you. You know this to be true, so when it's high summer and it smells of sunshine and honeydew, you may beg and plead for a taste of sunny days and something sweet. They'll withhold the taste of heaven, but you'll know it is because your people love you. Now, Messier gave a little bit of context for this poem, that this cat that we are in this poem actually belongs to their friend, and it's a true story of this cat that loves honeydew or loves melon, but quickly found out, or the owners quickly found out, that the cat was allergic. And I don't always necessarily want people to give like context on the poem or background, but I think that is useful in this case because something that Messier wants help with is the narrative strength of this poem, right? And if we know the narrative that they are sort of intending to tell, right, then I might be able to help get us like closer to that thing or to make it stronger. I think this is a really big idea just in reading poetry for me, is that critique can only really happen if you know what someone was intending to do. Because otherwise you're just sort of assuming that something might be like wrong or inaccurate without really understanding their goals. Which is why I usually don't give critique, but in this case we can. So narrative, right? Since we want to talk about narrative, and this is a narrative poem, right? Taking us through this sort of scene that we're setting and this new exciting thing, and then eating this beautiful fruit, so on and so on. It's good to kind of understand our narrative and the way it unfolds and how we're telling that thing. So, right, every narrative has a sort of beginning, a middle, and an end is how it tends to unfold. And some people will divide it into 5 sections or 3 or 4 or 6, so it just depends. But we usually have something to set the scene, to tell us what's going on, to show us our characters, and then there's some kind of change, right? There's some kind of development somewhere in the middle, and then we come to the end, right? And we get some kind of conclusion, maybe something satisfying, maybe dissatisfying, depends on the story and the storyteller. And I think, this poem falls very, very nicely into a structure like that, right? We set this sort of stage. It's high summer, soaring temperatures. This is all exposition. We're saying what's going on. Living in the house with an air conditioner. Your nap is fulfilled. Of course, we've established that you're a cat from the title. And the humans come home, the owners, right? And then there's something new. There's something exciting. This unfamiliar thing. And I like how this unfolds, right? Because the cat doesn't know what it is. And as a reader, I think, especially without the context, right? I was given the context and read it before that, like, this is about melon. So I had that. But if you don't have that context, I think this is a space where the reader might kind of have that curiosity, right, along with the cat, I guess pun intended, for this new thing and wondering, like, what is it, right? But of course, there are no words. Kind of, I think this is a very clever thing that the poet does here to continue to obscure what this thing is, right? Break it, they offer you a piece of high summer and honeybees, which later, I think this is another very clever thing that you do. We get sunshine and honeydew, which kind of points back to this high summer and honeybees, revealing in a subtle way at the end of the poem exactly what this thing is. I think even if the reader sort of doesn't come to that conclusion, right, knowing that exactly it is honeydew and misses that detail, the poem still works, which I think is nice. Something tricky with narrative poems can often be that if you're not very clear about what is happening, right, your sort of action and your events and your details as they go down the page, you're going to lose some of your readers. They're not going to be able to grasp what you're trying to say. But luckily, I think you're telling a narrative in a way that you don't necessarily have to be sure even what the fruit is if you miss that detail. And I think that's a good thing to do often. Because not every reader is going to read everything the same way. Not everyone's going to pick up on the details. And it's, very safe, right, to be able to tell a story that can work even with a reader who doesn't quite get everything. So, going on in this narrative, right, we have this mystery fruit, and we get like a really nice, like, vivid description, right? A piece of high summer and honeybees, sweetest flower, coolest breeze. You taste its soft flesh, and it's better on the tongue. Ambrosia, nectar, manna, the food of the gods. And I like how this really, like, escalates and pushes, right? We're talking about these, like, beautiful natural things, and then it's even better, and we get these, divine descriptions. Ambrosia, nectar, sort of the nectar of the gods. Manna, right? That's biblical, the food that God gives, and then the food of the gods. So really gassing up this fruit. and I think it works quite well to use something, like the coolest breeze here, because we set up at the start of the poem, right, high summer and soaring temperatures. So when we get to coolest breeze, I think this really helps give us that feeling of refreshment, right? And we reiterate high summer, which is nice to kind of add impact to this, which I think is good. And we are describing lots of things in this very summery way, right? Sublime and sunshine, right here. We have smells smelly and sunny, which is some lovely alliteration, right? And even just the repetition of the word. But smells smelly and sunny even alliterates with like what's and something. There's a lot of really good sound going on throughout this poem. So we have our beautiful summer fruit, and we're establishing it and really relishing in that, which I think is a really good thing to do in this poem, because we're describing, I think, a cat who really loves this thing, and we want to give it that time, and especially because we're setting up for sort of a tragedy, right? The twist that happens in the middle of losing the melon, right? At the end, we are no longer able to get the melon, and the cat is, just begging and pleading for this thing. And the better we make it sound, the harder it is to lose. So, how do we lose it? What is the twist in the story? But what's this? Something hot, something new, smells, no smells, and not so sunny. And what's that? You knew that something was wrong. So here we get what is like such a cool kind of technique in this poem. These bracketed phrases, right? Brackets, used like perfectly grammatically, I think are often used to add like something that is implied, where like a journalist might include that in a newspaper article if someone says he said this, and you would bracket over the he and put the actual name for like clarity. But brackets have this way of kind of inserting themselves and being this like pseudo correction or modification. And this works particularly well because the cool thing about, this section is it is mirroring some of the things before. And we are using these brackets to literally sort of rewrite what has already been written in this story, which is a cool way to develop the narrative, right? Because we are moving forward and we have new sort of action, as we said earlier, but the action is being told through this same framing and this same sort of structure that we had earlier. And in this case, right, that new meaning is the vet, right? Smells no smells, and not so sunny. And what's that? You knew that something was wrong. Your people are alarmed, have brought you to the vet. For them and for you, to give you a check, a poke, you gag. Right? So we're going into this sort of, I think, scary place. Anyone who's owned a pet knows that oftentimes their pets are very concerned when you take them to the vet. It's kind of a scary, right, sterile place, and I think that might be what we're saying here with smells no smells, right? That we've eaten this melon, and now we're going to the vet, and we once had these amazing smells, and now we're in this place that is, as I said, right, sterile. Sterile, cold, right, not sunny, usually a closed building, doctor's office, and then, of course, then we say the vet, and the checkup, and the poke, and the gagging, and all of that. So, what you said in your context that you gave me, right, is that you are describing this cat that started to eat melon or honeydew and really loved it. And then they found out that the cat was allergic, right? And so they had to take the cat in, and it's like, well, allergic. And the cat can't have this thing anymore. And something I'm wondering about the narrative is if that, like, allergic reaction is kind of glossed over here, right? We describe the euphoria of the melon for, like, I don't know, what is this, 15 lines or something? And the vet visit, this scary kind of inflection point that takes that all away, gets much less space on the page. And I guess we go on, right? We have the not sublime and not sunshine in your tongue, so we have a few extra lines here. But we also don't get any of the actual reaction in between, which was like probably not pleasant for the cat at all. I mean, I don't know this cat, and you know this cat better than I do, but I'm sort of left with a question, because we've missed that really important thing that has taken us from, right, eating the beautiful melon to the vet, sort of just in this like, but what's this? And maybe something hot, right? That's about what you give. Something hot is that feeling of, I think when we get allergic reactions as people, we get flushed, and we sweat and get hives and whatever else we get when we're allergic. And maybe I'd like to see more of that, because that's really the thing that takes us causally from here to here, right? And a narrative really is a chain of causes, right? We have an opening, and then something happens, right? The people come home. And actually, that's sort of a cause, right? They come home. And then this gives us the melon. I cannot write very well. So we get the melon, right? And then the melon gives an allergic reaction. And then that is the thing that causes us to go to the vet, right? And the vet is sort of an action, but also a thing that then causes us to get no more melon. And it's tragic. So if we ever break this chain in a narrative of something causing the next thing, it can confuse our reader. Now, that's not to say we can never sort of like break the narrative and go off in other unexpected directions, right? Every rule in literature is meant to be broken. But particularly as we're also, really flowering up our language, really using some like interesting and eye-catching techniques in the bracket, we want to make sure that whatever we are telling, our narrative, is super bulletproof and super clear, because otherwise, we might get lost along the way. So, to that advice of that question of narrative strength, I think that's maybe something I would advise on, at least for that part. So, moving forward in the narrative, we're back at home now, right here. My bad stars. And your people take you back home, where the smells remain of high summer and honeybees, the sweetest of flowers and the coolest breeze. You've tasted its soft flesh, deliciousness on your tongue, ambrosia, nectar, manna, the food of the gods. They offer you no portion. And it's really lovely, I think, at this point. Like, I think this part really highlights how effective the brackets are in this storytelling. Because, right, the cat is expecting all of these same lovely, potent flavors, this euphoria of experience. And then we can simply add, like, one bracket into this. They offer you no portion, right? As opposed to, you eat your portion and cry out for more. And the brackets really, right, highlight the difference between none and having before. You cry out for more, your people love you, and you don't understand why they don't give you a taste of heaven again. Your new favorite, the taste you adore. But your people love you. You know this to be true. So when it's high summer and it smells of sunshine and honeydew, you may beg and plead for a taste of sunny days and something sweet, but they'll withhold the taste of heaven. But you'll know it's because your people love you. And I think, I like the sort of, we'll say maybe fantastical nature of this. Right, the idea that the cat does in fact know that the honeydew is being withheld for the reason of the people's love. It's not necessarily something we can know or be sure of in the same way that the cat doesn't know the language, right, as we say earlier. There is no word in your native tongue, right? We don't speak cat either. But I think, poetry, the beauty is that we can bend reality as we wish, and we can tell the story in the way that most suits the things we want to say. So, this is nice, right? It's a beautiful ending that we have this love and this care, and, it's still sort of sad, and we can imagine the cat, running around the house, meowing at these people for their honeydew. But I think it does that very strong, right, narrative, conclusive thing that wraps it up in a nice way, and pulls it back in a way to the beginning, right? Because we even say, like, it's high summer, right? and the people come home with the stuff. And we go all the way back down, all the way to the end. And right, we have so when it's high summer. And I think this is just it's something that I'm personally a bit of a sucker for in poetry, is the end connecting right back to the beginning, to create this loop, right? I think that's a lovely thing that a narrative can do, is to sort of circle back on itself in this way. So in terms of narrative, I think like overall it feels very strong, and it has this nice inversion in the middle where we give us something really good and then we take that away. And that's really something that's so essential to narrative tension, right? Narratives are often carried by tension, right? Something bad is going to happen. So we need to like, deal with it, or or we're losing something, or there's something to be gained, or we are in a place where we don't have enough and need to go get it, or there are two characters who disagree on something, right? These setups, or ideologies against each other, these tensions create like the groundwork for exciting things to happen and interesting resolutions. And so we create the great tension of, the what's the word you used, ambrosia of the fruit, and the great loss, the contrast with the oblivion of not having it, right? Dramatic, but that's what poetry is. And yeah, tension can also be seen as this idea of contrast, and you do that really nicely, in the idea of, the cool, refreshing breeze of the melon against the heat of the summer, right? And then, of course, the having and the not having. So narrative is, I think, overall, like, really nice. Now, your second sort of question here is about whether your poem feels visually impactful, and how we can, potentially increase the visual impact. It's interesting to me that you say specifically visual, right? Because impact often comes, at least from a sensory perspective, from using all of our five senses, right? We have five senses, as we know. I mean, we actually have more than five senses, arguably, but the big five are the taste, the touch, the what else? Smell, sound, and sight. And often a poem or any piece of work is made vivid not just by using one of these things, right? Just visual, but using like all of them in some combination. And I think you do that throughout this poem. We can maybe like give them colors or something, and that's actually a good way to do this. I've never done this with a poem, but taking one of your own poems and saying, am I using all five senses? Now, we might not always want to use five senses. This isn't like a rule that we need to use five, but sight, right? We start with sight, and your people come home from a hunt, a kill. This feels pretty visual, like we're seeing them come through the door. Um, and then what's this? Something hot, something new, smelly. That's all smell. We'll go back through again. We're doing a lot of smell, really, right? We have smell and we have taste, and we're eating. We have the idea of not so sunny in the veterinarian's office. So that's a visual thing. And then we have like a bunch of feeling. Uh, Again, like sunshine, any of this sun and like summer stuff, right? Honeybees are kind of maybe a visual thing because they move and they fly around. But actually, I think we use not that much visual information, which I think is kind of rare, because a lot of times we as writers rely very heavily on visual information, And this poem very much is a taste and touch and smell, right? If we go taste, right, we have a taste you adore of the kibble. We have all this smell, and then we have the whole section of them offering you a piece. It's the food of the gods. It's incredible, right? And then we have, the thing in the mouth, which is mostly feel, but kind of taste. We can sort of imagine the sterile taste of some medical probe. And then we have the sweetest of flowers, back to the ambrosia and the nectar. A taste, we want a taste, honeydew, and then, right, lots of smell. We can go back through this, again. We have something new. I think we introduced this as a smell. Smells smelly and sunny, right? And what's cool actually is you're sort of merging the visual and the olfactory here. That's the smell word, olfactory. It smells smelly and sunny. And I think that's a really lovely thing you do because you're sort of taking an experience you don't understand, right? A cat's heightened sense of smell, which is probably, I think, like something cats rely on a lot, if I'm, correct. I'm not a cat person, really. But we're taking that and like filtering it through the visual, something that humans kind of rely on, which I think is a really cool way to engage with sense, right? So you sniff and it smells like sunshine, and then it smells like, you know, all of this stuff, and then you taste it and it's all of that. So I like this impulse that you do to like merge the senses together because I think that's more the reality that we understand as just like living creatures is that sometimes a sight comes along, with a sound very often, right? A taste comes along with a touch. I mean, almost always food has texture, right? Smell comes along often with a taste, and smell often comes with a sight if we can see the thing we're smelling. So these get linked together, and I think, you're doing the most of taste, touch, and smell. And maybe the fact that you're wondering about visual impact, tells me that you've already identified that you feel it's lacking in visuals. So one way you could approach that, right, is to take more of what can be sensed, in these other senses, taste, touch, smell, and describe them like you do with smells sunny. Because that's a cool way to really, lock and link these different pieces together of, senses, and it just all feels at that point, I think, very holistic. So that's an idea. But also, I think, you live in a house with an air conditioner. And any of these objects, right, when we just say house, when we say air conditioner, right, these can be fleshed out with more sights and sound. Now, this is going to be kind of hard to do, I think, since you've established a sort of verse like rhythm and like a rhyme scheme to your poem. But like this air conditioner, of course, can be making sound. It can also be like a metal gleaming thing, right? The house, right? What does this house look like? That can place us visually. And I think this space in which we live, right, is such an important visual thing for the poem because like houses are something we really understand as humans. We live in them mostly. And maybe you can even describe these visual things of humans in a cat way. In the same way that you have the cat not understanding language. You can talk about maybe the house as being sized for humans, right? That everything is big compared to the cat. And then it places us more into this different space. I like how you do that with the groceries, right? That they've come back from a hunt and a kill with bags upon bags sorted and stored. Also love the double meaning of of stored as they've just come from the store. Lots of really like clever little things like that in this poem. So so yeah, taking this world, right, and thinking, this might be, a very creative exercise to do, thinking about the world literally through the eyes of the cat. The perspective shift of being, looking from the ground or looking from above, uh, all of that. And I think when we go into a new space, right, our vet, that's probably a great opportunity to give, again, more visual information. We do this with the not so sunny, but this place is also maybe like metallic and like hard. That's a touch thing. An unfamiliar face, right, of the vet. These kinds of things can be very helpful for you visually. And maybe, right, another idea is at the end, we can no longer describe the taste of the honeydew. So maybe that's a chance to show that in a way through describing the honeydew as all of the senses that the cat still can experience it with, right? Looking longingly, right, at this at this beautiful glistening, I guess honeydews are green, cantaloupes are orange. Looking at this glistening green fruit, etc., etc., um, could be a way to show that we've moved to a place we can't eat it, both through the story you're telling and through the shift in the senses you use. And that could really like reinforce the overall, we'll say like narrative arc of your poem, because then we're going from tasting and smelling into other senses that we now are left to use instead. Yeah, I think that is most of my thoughts on this poem, on the questions you've asked. Um, and this is, yeah, I really enjoyed this poem. It's also very fun to have this be the very first one that I try to record on YouTube. This is very different for me, and it's a whole different way of thinking that I can just focus on a poem and there's no Twitch chat yelling at me. So, something I always do on Twitch is I make sure at the end to read the whole poem again. Because as we've, dived really deeply into something, right, as we've looked at all of this in super fine detail down to like specific words, we can lose track of the whole poem and the fact that, right, this is also a piece of art and something to be appreciated and something to just read through and smile at and enjoy. So, to conclude this, here is "Oh to be a cat," because, imagine this. It's high summer, soaring temperatures. You live in a house with an air conditioner. Playtime is over, your nap fulfilled, and your people have come home from a hunt, a kill, bags upon bags, sorted and stored. A new bag of kibble, a taste you adore. But what's this? Something hot, something new, smells smelly and sunny, and what's that? You knew. Your people have brought something. From that, for them and for you, they give you a sniff, but there are no words for the sublime and sunshine in your native tongue. And your people take it, break it. They offer you a piece of high summer and honeybees, the sweetest of flowers and coolest breeze. You taste its soft flesh, and it's better on the tongue. Ambrosia, nectar, manna, the food of the gods. You eat your portion and cry out for more. Your people love you. Cut another piece, decadent, your new favorite, a taste you adore. But what's this? Something hot. Something new. Smells, no smells, and not so sunny, and what's that? You knew that something was wrong. Your people are alarmed, have brought you to the vet for them and for you. They give you a check, a poke, you gag, but there are no words for the not sublime and not sunshine in your native tongue, and your people take you back home, where the smell remains of high summer and honeybees, the sweetest of flowers and coolest breeze. You've tasted its soft flesh, deliciousness on your tongue, ambrosia, nectar, manna, the food of the gods. They offer you no portion. You cry out for more. Your people love you, and you don't understand why they don't give you a taste of heaven again, your new favorite, the taste you adore. But your people love you. You know this to be true, so when it's high summer and it smells of sunshine and honeydew, you may beg and plead for a taste of summer days and something sweet. They'll withhold the taste of heaven, but you'll know it's because your people love you. Oh, to be a cat. Because imagine this, by Messier 47, or Lord of the Book Club in our Discord server. Thank you so much for sending your poetry to me, and it's such a joy to read, and I think that is just a really fun, whimsical poem, and I hope something I said along the way was maybe helpful. I know I said in the introduction that I was going to read like multiple poems, but doing this for the first time on YouTube is super different and super hard. So it's just going to be one for this video, and then maybe the next one will have one or maybe two, and we'll work up from there, you know. So that's all for this one, for my first sort of test round of reading my viewers' poetry. I appreciate you, Messier, for being a willing test subject on this journey. And for anyone who wants to submit, wants to have me go through your poetry with that level of detail, probably more as I go on and get more comfortable with it, then if that's you, there's a link in the description, and you can send your poem in the Google form, and it will be beautiful and lovely. So I think that's all for this video. Thank you if you're still watching this far. That's crazy. Thank you. And I suppose you'll see me on the next one for episode 2.